Catherine McLean, founder and CEO of Dylan Green. We're filming today at the WRISE Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. And I'm sat today with Kerry Duggan, who's the founder and CEO of SustainabiliD. Nailed it. So thank you for joining me. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your current role?
Sure. Well, founder, CEO, just like you. So fist bump and all the fun that goes with that. I started my company about 8 years ago. When I left the White House, I was President Biden's climate advisor when he was a vice president. I also helped run President Obama's Detroit task force for about 6.5 years of my time in service. And before that, I was at the Department of Energy in the ERE Clean Energy Office. The two features that I took out of my time in service into the company were advising executives on climate policy, politics, the state of technology, and how to talk about it.
Right.
So I do a lot of that sort of executive C-suite coaching for multinational corporations, labs, think tanks, universities, and so on. And then the other feature of my time in service was deploying climate tech in a distressed environment before it was common knowledge about what the climate tech is. So think about highly disruptive technology. Do you remember when you didn't know what an LED light bulb was?
Yeah.
There was a time when it wasn't, household term. And so deploying that kind of tech in challenging conditions, I was successful doing that in Detroit and helping with the streetlight conversion to LEDs, second largest streetlight conversion in the country. Took like every diplomatic tool I had in my toolbox to help them pull off. But that's what we do now inside the company, is helping these types of technology companies scale. And then for me, the magic is when I can introduce a climate tech company to a very bullish CEO, and they can talk about off-take agreement and makes the CEO look really smart. It helps these companies scale. And so in between that space, I also do a lot of thought leadership. I'm here at RISE, totally enjoying myself, by the way.
Yes.
This is great vibe.
Yeah, it is a great vibe.
Yeah.
And it's a diverse group of women.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Which is so exciting to see.
I find myself rarely in rooms where I don't know the far majority of folks.
Yes.
So it's actually really wonderful to
Yeah.
meet so many new people. And
Yeah. You've had leadership roles in both public and private sector. You mentioned the White House, Department of Energy. You're also working with. What key lessons have you learned about fostering collaboration between these two sectors in advancing sustainability goals?
well, I am a student of Joe Biden, and so a lot of it comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
I really stress, and I also teach at University of Michigan, and part of my coursework is actually teaching students not, the fundamentals of policy, but how to make it practical and get it done.
Yeah.
And, why networking in a non-transactional way really matters. And I think that's something women are really uniquely suited to do more of.
Right.
We're mobilizing. Yeah. So, and I think that I know that we spend a lot of time as women just being snap judged.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's not how we necessarily treat others. So I'm always happy to go down another layer. And what else? What else are you dealing with? What else are you facing? How else can I help you? And so fostering trust based on a real relationship, I think, is totally fundamental. And it's a big piece of how our practice runs. So a big chunk of our work with climate tech is site selection.
Right.
And community engagement.
Right.
And the calls I get from big companies a lot of times are like, what's the fast track to community engagement? Like you're missing the whole point.
Yeah.
But they're under enormous pressure to access the Biden-Harris bucks, and you can't do that without community engagement. So I see the lane for women. That's right, in a big way here. So
we were just speaking with Shalonda Baker, who I'm sure
Go
you
Blue.
work a lot with.
Yeah, happy to have her in Michigan.
Exactly. And she was, just saying the same thing, that she's left a legacy that you have to do X, Y, Z in order to get those dollars. And I think that's extremely important. SustainabiliD has partnered with global corporations, think tanks, major universities, national laboratories, and accelerators. Can you share some of the examples of your clients' success stories of having partnered with you?
Yeah, probably my favorite one at the moment, there's a particular climate tech company that we work with, very novel technology, and they approached us to help with their community benefits plan. They were putting an application into the Department of Energy, and we really coached them. We went slow and meticulous because they were eager to learn. They want to learn how to do it right because they're going to scale in multiple places, and we have to explain that every place is different.
Right.
But the feedback they got from their grant application, it was the best community benefits plan the department had ever read. Mm-hmm. And so that made me really proud and happy for the company. They, a lot of the novel technologies that are out there are now, they need that social license to deploy.
Right.
And if you hear the secretary talk, it's all deploy, deploy, deploy. Those cannot do that unless you pre-built the trust and baked it in.
Right.
So I'm really proud of that body of work that we're doing. But I'll also say I've just onboarded my first male in 8 years.
Okay.
My new managing director for consulting and operations, and he's a service-disabled veteran.
Wow.
He was my leadership coach when I was at the Department of Energy, so he's always sort of been in the background and following along what I've been doing, but now he sees how important, from a national security standpoint, the mission is, and he has visibility. He was on my advisory board first. He's visibility into the climate tech companies we're serving and realizing, these are superb technologists. And not necessarily managers.
Right.
So we're trying to professionalize climate tech as quickly as we can to achieve speed and scale. So those are kind of the fun things we're working on.
That's really interesting. What is your perspective on the intersection of environmental justice and sustainability consulting? So how does sustainability incorporate equity considerations into your approach?
Yeah. Well, the practice of building a community benefits agreement, either with a large multinational or a climate tech company, that is the practice. And a lot of why I do this work comes from that piece I was doing for President Obama.
Right.
President Obama started as a community organizer. Mm-hmm. So he understood how to elevate the level of the community voice. Big and small companies don't necessarily have that approach. I'm lucky to have the background I do, which comes out of advocacy and all those things. And having had success doing this work in Detroit, I think that's actually how I got picked up to be President Biden's climate advisor. I saw that I could do the high-level policy, but I also know how to do this thing, which is listen first, provide capacity. In my case, I was embedded to be the capacity partner for the state, provide the subject matter expertise and technical assistance, then throw in the resources. So you're sort of building capacity and expertise before you throw in the money. Peer learning is something we also employ. So, and then celebrating the successes. So I'm not a person who parachutes in and parachutes out. And I try to teach people that as well, because that's not a way to be very respectful in a community. Right. So that's kind of what I'm about. And I did study environmental justice as a grad student at Michigan. So I'm really grateful that I have that in my background. And I was able to take that in with me to the Department of Energy, to the White House, and to what I do now. So it's sort of embodied in all that we're doing.
Right. The final question I have for you is, you're on the board of directors at BlueGreen Water Technologies and Envergia and Perma-Fix Environmental Services. I receive a lot of inquiries from women who are interested in joining boards. Some of them do know where to start and how to prepare, because I think there are some great tools that hopefully you'll highlight. But also a lot of them aren't exposed to where the opportunities are. Mm-hmm. So you can also talk about that, please.
Yeah. I call this exercise sharing the password.
Okay. I like that.
And I think that's something women, again, we need to do a better job of. Traditionally, it's the old boys club, and you know the numbers about women on corporate boards. So I'm on a publicly traded one and 2 private one.
Okay.
Very much global in practice. And how I found my way on, there are some tools. In fact, there was a session yesterday that, for executive leaders, and I talked about this. But at the end of the day, I probably say this one 3 times a week, people only know what you tell them.
Okay.
So I gave an example under Chatham House Rule yesterday. I'm not going to tell you who, but I gave an example of a very senior male energy leader in our community who knew what I was doing before in policy. And when he saw that I didn't go back into service full-time, I'm on the Secretary of Energy's advisory board. But when he saw that, he's like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm doing corporate board work.
Right.
He's like, I didn't know you were interested in corporate board work. And I'm flabbergasted. I'm like, of course.
I wasn't interested.
And that's when it clicked for me.
Yeah.
You have to tell them. So I actually said that yesterday. You have to let people know. And it's actually pretty easy to figure out who's on the board. Everything's on websites.
Right.
So if there's a company you're particularly interested in, and if you happen to know someone, verbalize it.
Right.
And then there's some tactical stuff you can do. There are some things like if you looked at my LinkedIn, you can see how it's structured. Mm-hmm. That's intentional.
Right.
And there's a way on LinkedIn you can tell people that you're open to board work. You should be making it very easy for people to find you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So there's a way to specifically, as a job title, put you were not, so when it says you're open to work, so recruiters can see it, not so you have the green banner around your head, but there's a job title that actually is
board of directors.
Do you know, I have never seen anyone have that job title listed.
It's in the section that's just below your profile where you say what you're open to. I'll show you right after
That is very interesting. I think
it's simple tools like that. And that's another thing, just doubling down on people only know what you tell them.
Right.
Make it easy. Make it easy on yourself. And then as far as preparing, I can get a little tongue-in-cheek because I don't know a whole lot of men that took a class on how to be an entrepreneur. So I'm always a little reluctant. Like, if you've made it into this room, you probably have what it takes. If you're a CFO, you definitely have what it takes, right, to be on an audit committee. And those are hard to find. So make it known. Tell your other women, especially tell the men.
Well, somebody said to me the other day, they were like, we're over-mentored and under-sponsored. Ooh. And now I was like, oh, that really rocked my world, because it was such a good point. She was like, and mentorship is important. Of course it's important. I'm not saying it's not important. But, if I look at my career and the successes I've had, a lot of it has been with, having male allies who have sponsored me and who have, brought me up, to where they feel like I was capable, and I just needed to have that courage to realize that as well. Yeah. And so I think that, just to your point about just telling people and letting people know,
it's really so for women, especially, humble Midwestern girls like myself. I think I also have basketball in my history, so I have a little more gumption than your average Midwestern gal.
Yeah.
But I've had it beat into my
have a lot of gumption.
Interesting. So for probably a good 4 or 5 years after starting my company, I always just talked about the work and the substance of what we did. Policy, politics, tech, and comms. And one of my friends who was just leaving the White House, she phoned me and she said, "Why don't you tell people that you were the president's common advisor?" And I'm like, "Oh, that sounds kind of like, She's like, "But you were." So her message to MC, and we're all still learning. She said, "Say the thing."
Yeah.
Say it. Because not everyone can say that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't like coming off arrogant or whatever, but I did that work and it was really hard.
And I just really think it goes back to our DNA. It's just like, it's so ingrained in society. Like, we're trying to redo or undo, shall we say, the patriarchy, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Yes. We're unlearning while we're learning, relearning.
Take some time.
Yeah. But I this came up yesterday too in the session I was in. I use basketball terminology sort of on purpose because it is universal, especially with the men.
Yeah.
That also, they always, including the president, want to talk hoops with me.
Yeah.
Nah, I retired a long time ago. But there's one piece of it that I've done a speech on this. Like, if you see the lane, and we do, you have to take it.
Yeah.
And don't wait for permission. So that's how I did do in my company. Yeah. That's how I was successful in government. Yeah. I mean, I helped disrupt a very top-down way of doing business by just saying, I see this path. Yeah. Give me what I need and get out of my way. And thankfully, I had great leaders, Secretary Moniz, and at the time, Chief of Staff Kevin Knobloch. I will never forget, I went up to brief him, and I was like sweating bullets, totally type A, written this long memo, like, here's what I think the agency can do in place, in a specific place. And he's like, yeah, we're just going to cut you loose and you're going to go do all that you can. They trusted me. Yeah. And that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So leadership matters.
Leadership matters. Well, it was so nice to meet you.
Why?
I really, I can't believe you've not met before.
Well, there was COVID and busy things, but I'm sure this isn't our last time chatting.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Take care.